Greetings, listeners, and welcome to The Spiritual Experience, a show where we share stories of life, love, and redemption for all of humanity on Earth. So sit back and enjoy. Try to identify with the speakers and not compare. Don't forget to subscribe on all podcast platforms. I'm your host, Jay Lewis, and here we go. Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you guys are when this is released. Welcome back to The Spiritual Experience. Hope you guys are having a good day, a good life. Hope you guys are a little bit comfortable. And if you're not, then it's okay, because you're in for a treat. Our guest today is a young lady that I've seen, around in meetings for a bunch of years, and whenever she would share, my ears would perk up like, oh my God, that's somebody who's freaking working the program. So all of you, I want to introduce you to my good friend, Christine. Christine, say hello.
All right. Hi, guys. How are you?
All right. Good. Okay. So we were just talking like right before we started, that you came from a big book study out there on Long Island. Big book study in the morning on a Saturday. Did you ever think that was going to be your life? Like, what was like? Here we are.
No.
No. And you said you grew up on Long Island, right?
I grew up. I grew up in Far Rockaway most of my life, and then we moved to Long Island, and so I got sober in Long Island. So I go back there quite often to attend. Long Island is different than AA recovery. I mean, Brooklyn recovery.
In what way?
It's just different. Okay. So it's like in Long Island, like I was taught, when you see a newcomer that you haven't seen come into the room before, or someone who looks like a little lost, you go up to them, you introduce yourself to them, you take their phone number, and you proceed to call them.
Right.
Because how many times have you walked into a meeting and everybody handed you their number and you never picked up the phone, right? And in Brooklyn, I feel like when you come into a meeting, I've seen lots of I myself have been a newcomer who has walked into a meeting in Brooklyn, and I just felt like it wasn't as friendly.
Right. And I think maybe sometimes, because I've experienced both. I've gone to, like, if you come to 12 to Life and you come down the stairs, somebody's going to say hello.
Yeah.
And I've gone
And not every meeting in Brooklyn is like that. I want to point that out.
All right. Yeah, nobody's going to jump you in the corner anymore. But, like, I've gone to meetings in Manhattan where, like, it's like, oh, this is AA for real. They're really anonymous. Nobody want to talk to you when you show up. And you know what? A lot of times, I look at it from two different perspectives. One, I believe that we need the love, right? Yeah. But number two, I also know that newcomers, they can't take the love.
Yeah.
Sometimes you come in and they'll be like, I remember when I first came around that at a meeting, they would like hold hands at the end at this meeting in the city.
I used to hate that
Oh
shit.
my God, me too. Bro, I didn't want to hold anybody's hand. And
don't hug me.
Right. So maybe there's a little bit of that. And I think, we have to, we just have to always do better. Not that we're doing bad, but we always have to do better. So, but also you being from that area, does it feel a little bit more like home for you when you go to meetings out there?
It does. I got sober there. I mean, I not only 7 years ago did I get sober there, but I also got sober there 20 years ago and had 3.5 years in recovery. So I have a long history with Long Island AA. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I go out there and it just feels like home.
Yeah.
Where Brooklyn, I've had to work a little harder to make friends. And maybe that's just because I'm not from Brooklyn, It could be anything.
It could be anything.
But I walk in Long Island and I know it just feels like home.
That's perfect. So how did you, let's backtrack a little bit. So growing up, like, when did drugs and alcohol start to really, when were you introduced?
God, I just spoke in a meeting the other night and I said this. Long before drugs ever came into the picture, I always felt like something was wrong with me. There was just this restless, irritable discontent. Like I was never good enough. I was never loved enough. I was never pretty enough. I was just never enough. And it was just this, my mind was constantly going, and I couldn't put my finger on it then of what it was, but I know now that I was suffering from some type of ism, something.
Right. Move a little bit closer to the mic. It's okay.
Sorry. And, I took my first drink when I was 13.
Right. Right on time.
And that was it. All of a sudden I didn't feel so lonely. I didn't feel like I didn't fit in. I was, comfortable in my own skin for the first time. And
what was your neighborhood like?
Well, I grew up in Far Rockaway during the crack epidemic, and it was starting to get really bad over there.
Visually, like, what could you see? Could you see that, like, people were like...
Yes, people were on drugs. Like, it was the hood.
Yeah.
Straight up the hood. Like, anybody who's ever been to Far Rock today will tell you what it's like. It's for a white kid growing up in a neighborhood like that, like, it was rough.
Right.
And that's the God's honest truth. It was rough. I went to a Catholic school because my mother didn't want me in public school. And
yeah, she was trying to at least do that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you start drinking. What happened?
It just escalated. For a long time, it was like skipping school, smoking pot, drinking beers. Like, I watched the other kids in school. They would come in, they would, skip a class here or there and smoke weed with me, and they would go about their business. And they all graduated.
This is in Catholic school you were doing this?
This is after I got out of Catholic school. As soon as I got out of Catholic school, that was it. All bets were off.
Yeah, the bell rang. The bell rang.
Yeah, and once they put me in public school in Long Island, like, then I had a little freedom, and that was all I needed to run like hell with it. And, I would watch all these kids. They would cut classes, and I would hang out with them, smoking weed, drinking. We had a dealer out in Far Rockaway who used to give us 20 bags of Coke and stuff like that. But they would all go to class, and they all graduated. And then I was the one that wasn't, like, passing any of my classes. Like, I literally took it to a whole nother level. Like,
Right.
That was my life, hanging out at the corner store, at the high school, getting high all day.
Yeah, and I think I talk about this all the time. In reflection, now you start looking back at your childhood. I look back at my childhood and whatever, and I was that same person. But when you speak to other people, I always say, like, I don't know anybody who walks this earth that when they were a kid or they were a teenager, I don't know anybody that felt like they fit in. Yeah. Now, so I think, like, that part is just, like, normal. But how we deal with that is, like, what separates us from everybody else. But some people maybe need relief from, like, the moment or that anxiety. And we're like, no, I want this relief all the time. Then I'm like you. Now I'm in the corner, or I'm in the bodega, or I'm in somebody's basement all day. Yeah. And there is no school. There is no parent. There's no nothing. Nothing matters but what I'm doing.
Yes. Yeah. And like you said, that anxiety, that those thoughts were with me all day. So my whole life I was trying to escape that feeling, you know, and drugs and alcohol, it helped with that. Sure. I always say drugs and alcohol saved my life. Because what was going on internally with me, if I had not found some way out, some type of solution to that problem, I would have killed myself a long time ago.
Right.
Because the feelings, the thoughts were so dark, And
where do you think that came from? Like, what was your home like?
Oh, well, my real dad was, I never really seen him. He was a drug addict. When I did see him, he would show up drunk and make a huge scene. And my stepfather, like, he started smoking crack when I was, like, younger.
Right.
And, it was not uncommon for my mother to take me to my grandmother's house over in Far Rockaway and walk past a drug dealer who was wearing her jewelry and not be able to say anything about it. You know, there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of confusion. It
sounds sad.
It was very sad. It was not uncommon for the adults to be getting high with the kids, and it was not uncommon for the kids to be copping drugs for the adults.
Yeah.
So the last time I saw my father alive, we were shooting the Lordens together, and then he died 4 years. Like, that's the last memory I have of my father.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's you don't have a good resume for success with that. And
I was doomed from the start.
Right. I mean, look, we can look back and laugh now, but it's like, so those things, it's it's not your fault, right? Because this is the soil that we come from. But then it's like, well, how do you expect us to behave any other way?
Well, this is what I watched my whole life.
It's only what you knew.
It's exactly. But however, with that being said, I always said I'm never going to end up like that. And then I ended up even worse.
Right. So how'd you make it out of high school? What was the story?
I didn't. I dropped out. It was more important for me to work, so I had money to get high and do what I wanted to do. I dropped out, I think, in 10th grade.
Right.
And I got a full-time job. And that was it. I never looked back.
That was it.
That was it.
That was it. So then how long did that go before you said you got, you said you attempted to get sober years and years ago. How did you get introduced to recovery that way?
I was looking at 2 to 4 years upstate.
Right. So you're out there living the life, committing crimes.
Yeah. It kept spiraling and spiraling. And then I started, the opioid epidemic kicked off. And I was married to my ex-husband, and I started taking Vicodin for something.
Right.
And immediately that set something off in me. And there was never enough of it. And I worked for doctors my whole life. And I started forging prescriptions. And then after doing it like 30, 40 times, they were surveillancing my house.
Right.
And they tackled me in a CVS, and I got arrested. And I was it was before drug court, because it was like 2000. And so I had this great judge who took my case with him wherever he went, misdemeanor court, housing court, wherever he was, he took it. And he followed me through the whole thing. And he mandated me into a sober house.
Wow.
And I had 3.5 years with that at that time.
Right.
And then I stopped doing the things necessary.
So when you got to the sober house, what was it like for you? Were you just like, okay, this is a chance to change my life? Or is this like, all right?
No, absolutely not. I was like, this is bullshit. I can't believe I have to do this. I can't believe I have to live in this house in the middle of Hempstead in this shitty ass neighborhood. Like there was none of that. Like I was not looking to get sober at all.
Right.
And
you were not ready.
I was not ready at all. And
you were still married at the time?
I was still married at the time, but we were separated.
Okay. And
I met a guy in that rehab, in that sober house. And that's how I ended up. They say that you don't do this, you could do this for your kids and stuff like that, which I don't believe in. But at that time, I wanted him, and he was looking to stay sober.
Sure.
So I was going to do anything he was going to do to keep him, which worked out very well for me because I got a taste of recovery.
Right.
Even though I wasn't really working a program for those 3.5 years.
Right. And sometimes I think that regardless of the motivation, like even your love for him or maybe your love for a kid or whatever could like initially kind of get you there. But eventually you can end up sticking for yourself.
Yeah.
And then, especially if it's like another partner, because they're going to leave,
Yeah.
But, or you'll leave them or whatever. But, so you had an idea that recovery was like possible or
Yes.
like sobriety was possible.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, and then what did you just start? Did you get your life back together? Or
I definitely did. I got my life back together. I got married to the guy I really was in love with. Like, the first guy was not so much,
Right.
We got our first everything. I had my first AA baby. I had all these great things, like we were living a great life. And then at some point, I kind of just stopped doing those things. Like I stopped praying first and foremost. And after that, everything kind of just spiraled out of control after that.
Right.
I stopped going to meetings. I stopped talking to people in recovery.
Your life got busy, quote unquote.
Very busy. And AA just became like, not so important anymore.
Right. And I think that maybe, I want to know your thoughts on this. I think that it's like the disease is like gravity, and it doesn't yank you. It's just a little bit at a time it
Yes.
pulls you. Then you're like, oh, I fixed my fucking credit.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm somebody's mom
Yeah.
or somebody's dad. And then like all of these things, like the gifts that the program will give you will actually take
you out.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit at a time. Then you're showing up late for meetings, and then you're skipping the meeting. and then all the consistency, like all of a sudden
That's
you're
exactly
cured.
what happened to me. That's exactly what happened. And everything just got pushed to the side because I was too busy living the life that AA and God gave me.
Right.
And,
Yeah, the first thing you said, you stopped praying in the morning.
yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the prayer, I always say, my favorite prayer is just thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Very quickly after that, I ended up catching my first charge.
Nice. Oh, my God. What happened?
I think I got caught coming out of the needle exchange, and they surrounded my car. TNT surrounded my car, and
TNT.
they brought me in, and
So you relapsed, and then you went right away into hard drugs
yeah,
like
it was
crazy?
like 4 months later. I was like into hard drugs. It started out with pills, and then I was right back into shooting dope, and
Yeah.
then I picked up a new thing. I picked up shooting coke.
Right.
You know, like you think that when you relapse, that's the worst that's going to happen, right? I'll relapse. But it gets so much worse.
Yeah, relapse is just a word.
Yeah, it's just a word, man. Like,
That's like there's a whole train of shit that comes with it. And then once you can't unring the bell. Now you're on that train.
yeah.
Right? And it goes from, I'm skipping meetings and going this, okay, I'm going to start taking pills. A few months later, you're catching a charge, but you're somebody's mom, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So
Exactly.
how do you wrestle with that? Like, how do you feel when that's going on?
You know, in the moment, I'm just too, for me, I can only speak for myself. I had a lot of guilt about what was going on with my kids. But at the same time, you're so caught up in that, like, love is not enough. I thought that love was enough. I loved my kids. I would do anything for my kids. But at the end of the day, now looking back, I put my kids in situations. My kids should have been taken away from me long before it actually happened.
Right.
I mean, like, because as a drug addict, you don't see the horrific things that you're doing to your kids. You don't see the trauma. I'm dragging my 4-year-old to the methadone clinic around these people who are just, like, she has no business in a place like that.
Right.
To this day, she's 17. She remembers that.
Right.
Yeah. It's traumatic for a kid.
I think that they, and just even recognizing that and talking to them, I remember I was like gleeked up out of my mind, right? And then I'm thinking, gleeked up is coked up for those of you who don't know. So I'm like coked up out of my mind. I drank and drove every time I drove with baby seats in the back with my kids in the car. And I'm thinking that I'm having a good time by taking my son to do donuts in the snow in a schoolyard at like 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Right. And because I'm having a good time and I got the music blasting, the whole thing. This is like 1998, 99. Right. And I look over at him and he's freaking terrified.
Yeah.
And that kind of sporadic thing, that behavior, similar to how like your parents did with you, it creates like PTSD.
Yeah.
No disrespect to anybody in the military, whatever. But like PTSD, meaning that like some girls like, dude, my mom used to take me to the methadone clinic. And some little boy's like, yeah, my dad used to do blasts in the car and always had a 40 between his lap. And we used to get pulled over all the time. Like that's their story. Yeah. So you're going through these bottoms. How long does that last?
My relapse lasted about 10 years.
Right. And nobody thinks it's going to last that long.
No. And there were times during my relapse where it would get so bad and I would say to my husband, like, maybe we should go back to AA. But you're so caught in the grips, like, how do you just stop what you're doing and go back to AA? Like, it's really not that easy.
You forget how you got there.
You forget how you got there. You forget the traumatic circumstances that brought you there in the first place. And for me, I'm the type of alcoholic and drug addict who absolutely has to have her face planted in the ground. Like, the bottom has to be so bad for me. Like, everything has to be gone. Mm-hmm. And if there's a glimmer of hope that I can still keep going, I'll keep going with it.
Right. Right.
So
then what happens next? You said they ended up taking your kids?
Yeah, I ended up losing I actually lost custody of 2 kids 7 years apart.
Right.
The first one, who still doesn't talk to me, which is, it is what it is. And then I have a 17-year-old who technically still lives with my mother, even though she's always at our house, and she basically lives there, and I still don't have custody of her.
Right, like legal custody.
Legal, yeah, like my parental rights were terminated altogether.
Right, and was that the bottom for you?
No.
Or you kept going?
No, that was just the beginning.
Right. So what happened after that?
A couple of stints in Rikers Island, Nassau County Jail, eventually I was living in this house in Far Rockaway where I grew up, across the street from the buildings that I grew up in. And it was like a trap house. They were selling drugs and stuff out of there, and I had no business living there. And I had just done a year in the Nassau County Jail. And when I did the year, my husband went to a methadone to abstinence program in the Lower East Side.
Right.
And so he was coming to visit me on his weekend passes. He knew what was going on. He knew I wasn't sober, but we've been together a long time, And one night we're sitting there watching TV, and there's a knock on the door, and I open it, and there's two guys standing there with latex gloves on and ski masks. And he put a gun to my head, and he was like, "Where's all the drugs and all the money?" And I was like, "You got the wrong house."
Yeah.
We're drug addicts, not drug dealers. Long story short, they were standing there. I don't think that they thought past getting past the front door, and nothing more was thought.
Right.
After that, and they were looking for money and stuff, and I started screaming, and my husband went to stand up on the bed, and they shot him. And you would think that would have been my bottom, but it wasn't.
Right.
He almost died. He had to have two major surgeries, and while he was in surgery, I was like getting high and meeting the dealer downstairs and completely out of it. And he was in a medically induced coma for 3 days. And when he woke up, I think I was like nodding out in front of him or something, and he was like, "Get out! Don't ever come back here again. Like, I can't handle this with you anymore." And so
that must have been heartbreaking for you.
You know what? It was, but at the same time, like, I was so selfish. The guy just woke up, had a tube removed from his throat, and was in a coma, and had his stomach was literally cut wide open and left open in case they had to do surgery again. And I threw a cell phone at his head. Like, that's how selfish I was.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, whatever, and I left. And I went to this guy's house when we were on the methadone program. He lived in the Queensbridge projects. And when I had nowhere to stay, I would stay there. And he would let me sleep like on a dirty crib mattress on the floor.
Right.
And I woke up one morning after being there a couple of days, and his girlfriend had just died, like 3 months earlier. She OD'd in the bed. His son was like running back and forth. The house looked like a scene out of Hoarders. I'm not even kidding. And he was like on 150 milligrams of methadone and taking like 5 sticks a day. And he looked at me. He was this Puerto Rican guy. I love him. He was a great guy. But he was like, "What are you going to do with your life, Christina?" And I was like, "What?"
He says that to you. That's funny.
And I was like, "What?" Like, he was like, "From where I stand, I don't want what you got." Like,
right.
That for me, whatever that was so profound to me. Like, because in my head, I had like a couple $100 on me. I had an apartment I couldn't go back to because my husband just got shot there. But like, I had everything.
Yeah.
You
had the next one, which is everything.
Yeah. And with that, it was like divine intervention. Like, the only sober cousin I have called, and he was like, I answered the phone. He was like, "You good?" And he was looking to see if I was high. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good. What's up?" And he was like, "Get your stuff together. You're going to come stay with me." And that's where like my journey started.
Dude, that's like God.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Like, literally after this guy said that to me, my phone rang.
Right.
And I got on the train and I went back to Far Rockaway and I packed up a bag, and my cousin picked me up a couple hours later, and he took me out to Long Island, where I was waiting for a bed to get into another rehab.
Right.
And this is the amazing thing about AA at that time. Like, I didn't know a soul. Right? I had never been to a meeting in this area in my entire life. I knew nobody. And my cousin was working all day delivering. He worked for Boar's Head, so he'd be out all day delivering shit. And I literally every 2 or 3 hours had someone from AA. They wouldn't even introduce themselves to me. They would just be outside waiting for me to get in the car, take me to a meeting, and then like bring me back. And then a couple of hours later, somebody else would come and get me.
Now, was your cousin in a program? Is that how they knew, or you just?
He was in AA.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So he was like, "Yo, I got a live one in the house. She can't be left alone. My TV, everything will be gone."
So they had me in meetings like all day, and then when I finally got into this program, it didn't work out, and I ended up in this 3-quarter house out in East New York where I used to cop. Right down the block from Picken when I used to cop.
No way.
In the 90s. Yeah. It was a bad situation, right? And I remember, like, you couldn't be in the house from like 9 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that winter was like 7 degrees every single day. It was freezing. And so I would sit in meetings all day long. I would just go from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting.
All over the city?
All over the city, all over Brooklyn, all over Queens, just constantly at meetings. And I had a huge, huge support network. The phone was constantly going off. I was never alone. I had all these people who were always reaching out to me. And about 90 days dry, I wouldn't say sober, I was flipping scripts to get money, but I wasn't using drugs. And about 90 days dry, I woke up one morning and I wanted to kill myself.
Right.
Like this internal, whatever it was so bad that I was like, I'll do anything.
The pain.
The pain. It was so painful.
It was sober pain.
Yeah, like I literally wanted to jump out of a window. I didn't know what to do.
It wasn't like, I'm hungover and I feel bad. No, this is just, Christine, I am painful.
And the thing that really got me was that I had drugs on me and I didn't want to use them. Like I knew, like I was like, I'm not happy with drugs and I'm not happy without drugs. Like what is going on?
Right.
Like life should be getting better at this point, and it's just getting worse.
It's funny. At 90 days, life should be getting better. Like, how entitled are we? Like, oh yeah, I've been ripping and running for 25 years, and my kids are gone. I lost everything. I got a husband that I love that has a hole in his belly, but I got 90 days now. Like, what the fuck? Where's my sunshine?
Exactly.
But you can only say that now in hindsight. So how'd you get through those moments?
Well, I did have a sponsor at that time that I wasn't utilizing. Like I would come and go, and I finally picked up the phone and called her, and I was like, you gotta do something. Like you have to fix me.
Right.
You have to help me because I cannot live like this anymore.
Right.
And she said Monday afternoon you're gonna meet me at my job. She worked in this basement over in Soho, and after a certain time her boss would leave and she would have the office to herself.
Nice.
So she would say, bring your big book, bring a notebook, and we're going to start doing some work.
Wow.
And I didn't know what that entailed. I just knew that I didn't want to feel the way I felt anymore. Like the gift of desperation was so great. I would walk on glass to not feel like that anymore. Like I had never hit a bottom like that with no drugs or alcohol whatsoever.
Right.
Maybe
that stuff you are just keeping it at bay with all the drugs and alcohol. And then you find out that the problem is not even that. The problem is me. And then you're like...
That was my first realization of that. Like, maybe the problem isn't the drugs and the alcohol. Maybe the problem is me.
Right, maybe.
And I met with this woman once a week. And, we started going through the big book. And
right. What was that like for you in the beginning? Were you, like, understanding?
No. But I do know this. That as she would read that book to me... I'm a diehard intravenous IV junkie, like bottom of the barrel, like bottom feeder junkie. Like you couldn't even pay me to drink alcohol if I was going to drink today. But I don't know what it was. As she read that book, I remember saying to her, like, how do they know so much about me?
Right.
How were they were they following me? Like how I don't understand this book is about alcohol.
Right.
How am I relating so much to this?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's the way that we live on Earth is with like identification.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're like, I didn't even know when the book was written. I didn't know any of the history, any of this other stuff. I just know the same thing when I was going through it. I was like, is this a friggin' joke?
Yeah.
Like, is the camera going to come out now? And they're talking about like...
Am I getting punked?
Right, exactly. Because they know.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I'm the only one. And I can understand other people in meetings when they share stories like, yeah, I drank too. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Because like, for me, and what I identify and I admire and I love in you so much is that once you start identifying with like the substance, the feelings, those things,
Yeah.
then I start only looking for meetings that are like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't, listen.
Like the war story, I got it. Like,
I get it. Let me guess. You're connected, right? Now,
Yeah.
let me guess.
It was really what you're saying right now is, and I remember like looking at that woman, and I was like, I don't have nothing in common with this woman. I don't know how she thinks she's gonna help me. I shot drugs, and she like drank and took a couple of Vicodin, like.
Right.
But when she started telling me how she felt when she got sober, and how she wanted to die too, that was something I understood entirely.
Right.
You know,
That must have been eye-opening.
totally. You know, like her drug story, we never even discussed that really.
Yeah.
But
It
those
doesn't matter.
feelings, when she said that, I was like, I have that. How did you get rid of that?
Right.
You know, how did you fix that?
Yeah.
You know?
One week at a time, sitting down with somebody and going through the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did it progress for you?
Well, when we started the work, I kept saying to her, so I had been sober once before, you
Right.
know, and they talk about that first time as a gift, you know, and the second time was just so bad. What brought me in, you know, getting my husband shot.
You lost everything.
I lost everything.
You had nothing when you got in the beginning, and then you got all this shit, and then you lost it all.
I lost everything.
Right.
And not only that, like there are horrible things I have put my kids through.
Sure.
We were discussing some of this before. Like,
Yeah.
I have done some horrible. I was a terrible mother when I was using it, and I'll say that for anybody who's going through losing their kids to drugs and alcohol, and the system comes in and takes your kids away. Like I get it.
Yeah.
That was so important for me to hear when I came in, how other women were dealing with not having their kids.
Sure, and rightfully so.
Yeah, you know, and I deserve to have my kids taken away. I was telling you that also, you
Yeah.
know.
But there's redemption,
Yeah,
and there's love.
yeah.
But the thing that we were talking about, you got to get it a little bit at a time.
Well, that's the thing. I would walk in every day and I would say, I don't know why you're wasting your time with me. This shit is not going to work. Like, I've done this before, and then I ended up on a 10-year binge. Like, this is not going to work. You don't understand. I'm like a special case. I'm unique, you know.
Right. But you don't have anywhere else to go.
But I have nowhere else to go. So, like,
I guess I'll hang out.
Well, that's what she would say to me. She would be like, well, what do you got to lose? Just do it. Like, your life is for shit. And I
Right.
agree. And I could identify with that. It was. Nothing was going right in my life. And I wasn't even using drugs at the time.
And you start putting together time and start doing the work.
Yeah. And so we would start reading this book once a week. And then we got up to, you know, step one and you know, and talking about how we're powerless and my life was unmanageable, you know, and there was no need to look further than, if I want to understand the powerlessness of this disease, like I talk about this in meetings all the time. Like when I lost custody of my daughter, a family court judge told me, Christine, go to your methadone clinic. Don't come here with a dirty methadone urine and nothing else in it. And I will make sure your rights to your daughter are not terminated and you'll have a chance to get your daughter back. And I managed to stay clean for like 2 weeks, except for the methadone, up until the day before my court appearance. And I love my kids. I love my daughter. I would do, any mother loves, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember the night before someone showed up at my house with a sack of blow. And not only did I not have a clean urine, I never showed up for the court date at all.
Yeah, because alcohol and drugs are stronger than love.
Yeah. And so like the powerlessness, I got it. The unmanageability, I got it. You know?
Right. That you could see like, okay, like this is like a fact, like a mathematical equation.
Yes.
That like, okay, this is not like a theory.
Yeah.
Like I have proven myself, I mean,
And
listen,
I was not using drugs, and my life was completely unmanageable. Like
Right.
the unmanageability part, I completely got. Like, why was my life spiraling out of control?
yeah.
You know, and then we, you know, like we just kept going. You know, when we got to step 2, I remember her. She was reading Bill's story. Mm-hmm. You know, Abby sits across the table from Bill, and he's talking about miracles and stuff like that. And I'm like, well.
And
You know,
Bill's drinking, by the way.
Bill's drinking, yeah. And you know, he's talking, and Bill says, you know, what is this but a wholesale miracle sitting across from me? You know, like they used to get high together, they used to get drunk together. Like
Right.
Bill knew what he was like when he was fucked up, you know, and And I remember saying to my sponsor, like, you know, I'm in a 3-quarter house. I lost my kids. My husband barely wants anything to do with me. My life is falling apart. Like, where's my miracle? And she was like, wake the fuck up. You're in it. You're in a 3-quarter house.
Right.
Your kids are in a safe place.
Yeah, like the perspective.
Your husband didn't die. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it.
Right.
You know?
Because it was, you know, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Until you have, you know, part of the disease that I always share about is the mental part. The disease is, everybody, if you don't know, is 3 parts: mental, spiritual, physical, right? So the mental part, a big part of the mental part besides denial, is that we are literally the last to know anything. Mm-hmm. The whole room could be burning, but until the fire touches our skin, we don't even know it's on fire because we're thinking about us.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like not only with drugs and alcohol, that's like with life.
Yeah.
Like it's very hard. So then that change starts to happen with you. You say, okay, maybe this lady knows something. Or you just like keep going and you just keep going?
Yeah, it just kept going. Like I didn't comprehend fully a lot of it. I identified.
Right, the concepts.
Yeah, the concept I didn't get. I identified with it, but I didn't get it. You know what I mean? And you know, I remember like telling her like I'll never get this because my God is like warped. I'm a Catholic school survivor. You know, like I don't believe in any of that. Like why would God want anything to do with someone like me? Like,
right.
I'm a terrible person, you know? And she would just say, keep going. Keep going. You've got nothing to lose. You've never really done this before. You've never really applied yourself to this. Just be open-minded, honest, and willing. And I made an agreement to myself that I was going to do that. I wasn't honest with anyone ever in my life. I lied about everything. And I said to myself when I came in, I'm going to be honest with this woman about everything, about selling drugs while I'm making meetings.
And all the other stuff.
All the other stuff that was going on, hanging out in the projects, hanging out with family members who were getting high in front of me. Like, I'm going to tell this woman everything. And I think that's what saved my ass. I was able to hold on long enough to get this.
Right.
By being honest with her about every single thing that I was doing. You know, and then we came up to step 3, and I was like, she was like, you know, now it's time to start praying, you know, and I was like, pray? Like, how do you want me to do that, you know? And she was like, basically, God is a thought. You're like, you're making way too much out of it, Christine. You know, like, come down a little bit. Like, God's just like how we're sitting here talking, you can do that with God. Like, you can curse, you can, whatever it is that you feel that you need to do to talk to God, you do that. So I would put Post-it notes all over this sober house. And every time I saw the Post-it notes, they would say pray, and I would just say a little prayer. Like we were talking about before, like, thank you, God. You know,
that's it.
Something so simple, you know, and that would get me through, you know, and I would
even if it just gets you through the moment.
Just the moment,
that's all you need.
And I'd walk in the following week and be like, I don't feel none of this God shit. I don't know what you're talking about. You know, and her answer was always just keep going.
Right.
You know, and then we did.
And then the inventory comes.
The inventory comes. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think that I wrote out the most thorough 4th step.
You can do the best you can at the time.
I did the best I can at the time.
That's why it works.
And let me tell you something. I think I had 12 people on there after being out there for 10 years. Like, it was not the most thorough. Looking back, I've done way longer 4th steps.
Right.
But it was enough to unblock me from God.
Right.
So that that little shift in my perspective, like these patterns kept coming up. I kept seeing things about myself over and over and over again through that writing that work.
What was the thing that you discovered initially from that first 4th step about yourself?
I'm very
that
controlling.
was surprising.
I'm very controlling.
Right.
I'm very controlling. I have validation issues. I need to be loved. I need to have attention all the time. I need to repeat myself so that I think if I tell you a million times, you'll hear me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, just
you need to matter.
Yeah.
You need to matter. And it's what's funny to me is I'm saying that because I'm the same way. Like, I don't trust when somebody says, okay, after I say something.
Yes.
I'm like, no. You don't understand. I need to Yeah.
Yes.
Right. But it's taken, you know, but then also managing that, and we'll dive back into the steps, but managing that with like, listen, apparently there is not enough love on earth for me anyway.
Yeah.
Even though I need the love, the amount that I need doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. So like I need.
And on top of that, I'm a victim.
Oh, yeah.
I got this victim mentality that everything has been done to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
And some of it has, but not everything.
but not everything.
Not
You know,
everything.
but I use it for everything.
Sure. It's my favorite thing. My favorite is how dare you?
Yeah.
That's my favorite. Oh, that's my disease. He gets up out of the corner. He says, he cracks his knuckles. Yeah. How dare you? How dare you? So now, when you shared you shared the fifth step with your sponsor, was she like illuminating all this stuff to you, or could you see it in black and white once you were writing it?
I could see it in black and white, and she was also telling me, like, do you see this pattern? Do you see the pattern here? You know, and
it's undeniable when it's on paper.
That's it. Like I didn't even need her to tell me. It kept coming up in every resentment, in every, you know, and I got to tell you that when I did my fifth step with this woman, you know, I followed the instructions afterwards. I sat by myself for an hour. I asked God if I left anything out, blah, blah, blah. And I remember the next day she called me and she said, do you feel any different? And I said, no. Am I supposed to feel something? Because I don't feel nothing. Like, they talk about in the big book how, like, our spiritual, like, some people have spiritual experiences that are of the educational variety. And that's very true with me. Nothing happened like a white light experience. Like that.
Only bad things happen that way.
Yeah, like this was very slowly for me.
Sure.
You know, and it was in, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that it was in the action of doing the work that I came to see these things, you know, how God had been there the whole time, you know.
You didn't even know.
I didn't, honestly, I had this idea of, why is God doing this to me? Look what God did to me. And now I see it, and it's like, look what God did for me.
Right.
You know, all of it was very hard, but I wouldn't change not 1 minute of it.
No.
Because the person I am today is because
it
of all
grew out
of
of
that.
that.
Yeah.
So now you knew what you had to work on with like your character defects and stuff. So how did you start to change? Because for me, right? So now I knew what I had to work on after I did my first inventory, and similar to yours. So then I would try and work on it, and I would try it once, and I wouldn't get the result I want. And I'm like, this is fucking bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Like over time, like surrendering to like a new way of life.
Okay, so, and I share this in meetings, that when I did that fifth step and I didn't feel anything, you know, at that time I had been making a lot of NA meetings, right? And I was still flipping scripts. It was in there. I was honest about it. And I said I was going to stop doing it because something started happening that I had never experienced before. Like I was gaining a conscience. Things that I was doing were not feeling right with me anymore. Where at that point, since the day I got sober up until that point, they felt fine, right? There was no conscience. There was whatever. Like, you don't know my situation. You don't know my financial situation. This is why I got to sell drugs, you know? But something was happening to me without my permission. Like God was changing me without my permission. And I wanted to go to like this NA convention or something like that, somewhere between my fifth and my seventh step, I think. I would say I was like 8 months sober. And somebody said to me, if you sell scripts one more time, you'll be able to pay for that whole convention. And everything in me agreed with that. Like what was going to come out of my mouth was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And instead the answer was, if God wants me at that convention, I'll be at that convention. And like the whole world changed in that moment.
That's like the third step. That's like the second step. That's like
I didn't
everything.
understand anything from 7 down until that moment.
Right.
I just kept doing what was asked of me. And then in that moment, I got it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like I got it.
You earned it by making that choice.
Maybe.
That's what it is. It's like my old sponsor, only because he moved away, I love him, Free Willy. He used to always say, God don't deliver. You got to come.
Yeah.
It's seeking. It's not like, I'm going to sit around and he's going to show up and here's all your cash and prize. Like, no, you got to go get it.
Yeah.
In those moments when you are like, I can't can't do this anymore. And that's when you turn that corner. You don't even know what's on the other side of that corner, which is him and a whole nother life and everything. But like in that space is like, that's where you...
And I don't know if this applies here. I just want to, like, anybody who struggles with Al-Anon and stuff, like, I absolutely
everything applies.
I absolutely had to reach that bottom where I wanted to die like that in order to get this. Like, I'm wholeheartedly believe that people who are not ready should be left alone until they are ready. Because any other way, I would have never gotten this. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If I had come in here through drug court, it might have helped. It might, it may or may not have helped, but I had to absolutely, for me, had to reach like the worst bottom I've ever, dry.
Yeah.
That's when I was willing to take the step. That's when I was willing to take suggestions.
Right.
That's when I was willing to do whatever was asked of me, even though I didn't believe any of it was going to work.
It doesn't look like it's going to
Spite
work.
is a great motivator.
Yeah, but that's the other thing. It doesn't look like it's going to work. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
And your sponsor knows better. She's just like, just keep going.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't make sense. It better not make sense right away, because if it does, you ain't getting it.
Yeah.
Like it all comes together at one point. So now you're at that point. What's your life like now? And then looking back, like how do you even? Well, what's your life like now? Let's get that out of the way.
It's I have a very nice life today. I don't.
How many years are you in now?
I'm 7 years sober.
7 years
I
in.
had 7 years last month.
Oh my God, awesome.
Yeah, and I'm a mom today. I show up when I say I'm going to be there. I'm a good wife today, I think. You'd have to ask my husband, but I think I am a good wife.
I love him, by the way. I tell you, he's the best.
Poor guy puts up with a lot of shit.
Oh my God. No, but he's a good man.
He's a good guy. I got very lucky. I'm a good daughter today. I'm a good sister. I'm kind. I'm patient. I'm sometimes tolerant. I'm employable today.
Right. Trustworthy.
I'm trustworthy. I can sit in a room with valuables and nothing goes missing.
Right.
When I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'm there. I'm a good person. And
how do you feel about that? See, like these things are like how you're acting. But how do you feel? Like, because it's all true.
Well, I don't believe it sometimes. And we were discussing this before, too.
Exactly.
Like, I don't really necessarily believe that I am those things.
But apparently you are.
But apparently I am. Because other people seem to think that I am. Everybody seems to trust me. Everybody seems to rely on me. But there's still a part of me that thinks, well, I'm just like a junkie
little
dope
voice.
fiend.
Yeah, that you're one pop away.
Yeah, like... why are they looking at me? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I never, ever am like, wow, I guess it stops there.
Right.
Like this recovery thing never ceases to amaze me. Like, I'm 7 years in and I'm still like learning shit every single day. Like I'm a newcomer.
Right.
And I hope that never changes. I got to be honest with you. Like, I hope that never changes because I'm still having all these amazing God wink moments, and experiences.
So how do you handle that voice that tells you those negative things when it comes? Like, if it's just you and the voice comes that says, you're a loser.
I have those thoughts all the time.
Me too.
Prayer is a big part of that. Nightly inventories are a big part of that. And reaching out to others, calling my sponsor, the inventory is a big part of that because I believe the lies, that's the delusion. I'm not good enough. People don't like me. I'm not loved.
They'll
blah,
never
blah, blah.
love you.
They'll never love me. I'll never be accepted. And I can run like hell with that shit. And immediately isolate myself from everyone because I think you don't want nothing to do with me.
Right.
Because that's what I tell myself on a daily basis. But when you're doing this stuff and you're doing out a nightly inventory every night, you can see it's written down on paper. The delusion is that I'm not good enough. Who says?
Right. I think that also what recovery gives us and then what we hopefully we want to share to the world is this, in this community, is that it's very rare that our own perspective initially is correct.
That's right.
It's very rare. So talking with somebody else and saying, listen, I feel like this, or I think this person does this, or whatever, or doing an inventory, however you want to do it. And listen, for those of you who are not in any 12-step programs, whatever, I always urge everybody, listen, use me as your qualifier. You can go to Al-Anon, blah, blah, blah. But you can go and you can find inventory sheets online.
Yeah.
Or you can find a book like I think there's a book called like 12 Steps to Freedom, which is like not AA or NA, whatever, but it gives you an idea to evaluate a situation, to give you the actual perspective.
Yeah.
And they talk about it all the time in AA, especially in the 4-step, where they say any business that doesn't do an inventory is doomed.
Yeah.
Because once we do an inventory, we see, okay, well, it's almost like if I didn't have, and they're not a sponsor, so I'm not shouting them out. If I didn't have Credit Karma in my phone, the app, I would think my credit was shitty all the freaking time.
Yeah.
But until I see that number, then I say, okay. Or when I'm exercising and I'm living like an animal for weeks or months and I need to lose weight, I need to face that scale to see that number. So I know, because it's never what I think. Yeah. But once I see it, then I say, okay, I accept this. And I say, okay, well, what are the actions I can take? Like you said, like prayer. Prayer is going to give, if you for me, I form a connection with God, like prayer gives me release. Yes. It doesn't give me results. Results, I have to do something. Yeah. But I get that initial release, where I say, okay, God didn't save us from drowning to beat us up on the beach, right? That's a fact. So then what can I do? I can go to a meeting. I can listen to a meeting on YouTube. I can do something to get out of that moment that's not destructive. Because even in recovery, like I said, I can reach for the cookies. I can reach for entitlement. I can reach for something that is like destructive.
Yeah. 7 years in, I can tell you that my life can become very unmanageable very quickly, spiraling, without those inventories and the prayer and, meetings, sponsorship, helping others. That's a big one too. When I start to feel like I'm not good enough, like what does the book say? I always go back to the book, helping others is the foundation to our recovery.
It's a foundation to life.
Yeah. And it's not just people in AA.
No.
The woman who's struggling to get the stroller up the stairs on the subway, like help her. Right. Sometimes it's just that simple. Yeah.
Yeah, I do this thing where my litmus test, and everybody who listens all the time is going to get annoyed. Like when I walk from my house, from my apartment, whatever, to the car, bro, I wave at all the neighbors. I just wave at them one at a time. And that's how I know my spiritual condition. Like if I'm not even willing to wave at the neighbor, I need to check myself. Yeah. And so I wave and then it started like that. Then I say hello. Then I say God bless you, and it's whatever. Just doing these things where like nobody could say that that's not a helpful thing. Yeah.
I struggled with that too, like saying good morning to the girl at Starbucks. Like I was always the type of person who was like I never say good morning to people, and my sponsor got on me about that. Like, how do you start your day like that? Yeah. Without kindness to other people. Yeah, yeah. I walk into Starbucks like, good morning.
Like you think you need the coffee to make you nice. When I first started, when the first sponsor I had that took me through the steps, like when I started doing the 11th step and, I think it was an 11th step. We started, we'd go through St. Francis prayer, whatever. Anyway, this is what he told me to do. He would say, every day, man, you got to start putting quarters in other people's meters. You just walk by, and this is back, they don't have meters now, but this was back then when they had meters. Said, bro, if you got a quarter, you walk past the meter, you reach into your pocket. If you have a quarter, you have to put it in and you have to just keep walking. Yeah. And that, because nobody knows but me and the meter, and maybe the person don't even know. Yeah. But that's like how I started building the relationship. So when with my higher power, so that when I need God, when I need him, he's there because I have the thing.
Yeah.
I have it already built in. And I'm like, it's an inch at a time that I do that. And now, like, when I leave a parking spot, I always give the ticket to the next person. And I'll say, hey, God bless you. And then we make a joke. It's us against them and blah, blah, blah. But, learning how to live that life is foreign to me. It's what I always wanted. That's the love I always wanted from earth. I get it from doing that.
Yeah.
And, when you evolve into somebody who's like that, what do you think you could have maybe even said to the young lady who was at like step 4 that had a list of all this garbage? Looking back now, like, what could you have possibly even said to her to just give her that comfort, like, except for like keep coming back?
God. I mean, that girl wouldn't have even believed you if you had told her it was going to get better. Like, I'm telling you, like, it's really a miracle that I sit here. It's like really through God's grace and mercy. Like, yeah, I put in the work, but I really, you couldn't have told me anything at that point. I really did not believe that this was going to work for me. I didn't think that things were going to get better. And then slowly they just did, But that's how I thought. Like, I thought that little of myself, that you were worthy of recovery, but not me.
Right.
Until it happened. And then I was like, oh, wow, like.
So what are you going to do with the rest of this love song now that you can be anybody or do anything? And you can, which all that really means to everybody else is that you can be happy.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do with that information now that you know?
Well, now I share it as much as I possibly can. I'm not one to keep my anonymity a secret. Like,
right.
I don't care. I don't care that you know that I'm in recovery, because what I thought of myself is way worse than what you can ever think about me.
Right.
So I'm very open and honest. There are a lot of people on my Facebook and on my Instagram who I got high with who saw what a mess I was. Every year I'll celebrate my anniversary. I'll put like my coin up on Facebook, and I always make it very clear, like, you can always talk to me. I'm always here, But yeah, just being honest and open about it, hiding stuff like that doesn't help nobody.
Right.
It doesn't help nobody. When I came in and I saw people who were just as bad as I was getting their lives together.
Sometimes people that you knew.
Sometimes people I knew, yeah. People I was
getting
high with.
So it wasn't like, oh, maybe you did do that. Like, no, we were next to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like that. There's a lot of members in my family that are still out there getting fucked up. Some of them they didn't even make it.
Yeah. A lot of them don't.
A lot of them. And if anybody should be dead, it's me. Mm-hmm. And for them to see me, I ran into a family member last week at a meeting in Long Island. And I said, how long you been coming around? Well, I haven't seen him in a couple of years. And I said, how long have you been coming around now? He said, a year. He said, how long you been coming around? I said, I just celebrated 7 years last month. And the way his eyes bulged out of his head in shock,
That's got to leave your heart full.
Yeah, like this guy knew what I was like when I was out there. Like,
oh, you got the same DNA. Fuck.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, to help, just to be able to carry that message, like it was carried to me, God, I always say this, God saved my ass. He brought me literally out of the gates of hell. It is my debt to God to help as many people as I can.
Yeah. And that's in and out of the rooms.
In and out of the rooms, no matter what.
Yeah.
Sometimes that comes in the form of talking to a mother whose kid won't stop shooting heroin, things like that, like whatever it is,
Just letting people know that they're not alone.
That they're not alone,
And it's and this is this life is here for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we got to do what we got to do. Anyway, Christine, it was a pleasure having you.
Thanks,
this was
Jared.
so awesome. I love you so much.
Love you
and
too.
Everybody who's listening, find us on Apple, Spiritual Experience, Spotify, everywhere else where you get your podcast. Please like and share, and we'll see you next time around. Love you. Peace.
Bye.
We want to thank you all for joining us today. And please don't forget to like and subscribe on all podcast platforms, and find us on Facebook where you can become part of our family. We'll see you around.